Welcome back in, everyone, for another little bit of history with Hookstead. We have a really fun one today that I'm super excited about. But before we get into today's topic, what I need everyone to do is like this video and make sure you are subscribed. That is, like and subscribe. And of course, feel free to comment as well. That helps these videos get more reach so we can share more history, share the stories of American heroes with more and more people. We want this to reach as many people as we possibly can. So please like and subscribe, like and subscribe, like and subscribe. Now that we've said that, what are we talking about today? We are talking about the 2018 Battle of Conoco Fields. Now, many people don't even realize this. There have been engagements between Russians and Americans in Syria since essentially the Civil War, really when ISIS went there and the United States sent JSOC assets. The Russians sent a bunch of their people, including their Tier 1 assets. I believe it's called Alpha Force, Alpha Group. And then you had Wagner, which was all over the area. And there have been, there's been skirmishes between American forces and Syrians, and it's a very confusing, chaotic, combined battle space. But there's one night, it is the night of February 7th, going into the early morning hours of February 8th on 2018, that is one of the most significant moments in the Syrian war and the war against ISIS that really no one talks about, no one knows about, and that is when Delta Force absolutely obliterated, combined with some air power and assets on the ground, obliterated up to as many as 200 Russian fighters. So what happened? Let's start with a little bit of background of how the U.S. ended up in Syria. Obviously, you had a massive civil war with Bashar al-Assad, who's clung to power against seemingly what looked like all odds. And in 2015, Russia sent troops, air assets into Syria to protect Assad's regime. That is about roughly the same time ISIS blows up, becomes a huge problem, and the decision is made roughly the same time that we're going to send in Delta Force, we're going to send in air power, we're going to start hammering ISIS. We believe this terrorist organization is now worth our blood, time, and money, and we're going to go fight them in Syria. A lot of different things going on, small area. You've got the Russians, you've got Iranians, you've got back proxy groups, which still exist. Then you've got the U.S., you've got the Free Syrian Army. It's absolute mayhem. So what happened on this February 7th, 2018, the night of? A massive group of roughly 500 mix of Russians and Syrian fighters descended on a American position and a the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are really just people backed by the United States. They're not really moving the needle. This is all done by the United States without any doubt. They were holding a position near the Conoco oil field. Okay, and I have spoken to multiple people involved in this battle. I've spoken to one on the record briefly. You can find that interview. But really what they've told us kind of off the record, and what's not really out there is the public still doesn't have a great idea of what happened. They started getting hammered with mortars. They're getting rocketed. And it becomes very clear very immediately that this is a coordinated attack. This is not just some idiots with RPGs firing them at the American positions, which is held by Delta Force. There's at least one Army Ranger there. There's some SDF guys, and they're holding this position, and they come in under heavy, intense fire, and then tanks show up. They had, I believe, T-72s and T-55s were being used by this mob of Syrians, Russians from Wagner, and the United States reached out and contacted the Russians through the deconfliction line and said, hey, are those your guys? According to General Mattis, and they denied it. I believe he asked twice. They denied it again. And Mattis then says to the ground commander, annihilate them. To get the commands to the ground to annihilate them. This results in a strike package. I'm going to pull up the information here because it's incredible. So you have 40 American troops versus 500 Russian and Syrian troops. Now, this is a very interesting point. One of the guys I know involved in the battle, he looked out onto kind of like, off in the distance under his nods, and he sees a guy over there who's got nods on as well, modern kit, modern gear, not what you would see from like the Syrians, not what you would see from the Iranians. This guy looks like he could be an American soldier. And this American soldier actually thinks for a second, do we got guys over there? He gets on the radio and says, who are these guys? They look like they're Americans. This is important because the Russians have tried to claim that it was only Wagner Russian contractors that were involved. However, many people with direct knowledge of the situation do believe there were Russian troops, official Russian troops in the mix, and the reason why is their gear and equipment match that of the Russian troops. This is not coming from me. This is coming from people that were directly on the ground. So he sees these people out on the horizon, if you will, for lack of a better term, under his nods, and they look like they're kitted out like they're Delta Force, but they're not. They're Russians. So they make this advance on the position, and they're hitting it, and they're hammering it, and Mattis again gets on the phone with the Russians. The Russians deny it. The Russians deny it. The Americans start laying into them. This is the strike package that was put together that came and obliterated these Russians and Syrians. You had F-22 fighter jets, F-15E strike fighters, B-52 bombers, AC-130 gunships, AH-64 Apache attack helicopters, MQ-9 Reaper drone, RQ-7B Shadow unmanned, I don't even know what that is, unmanned vehicle. And then they had some HIMARS in the area, and they had some howitzers in the area that they also used to return fire. This is where they get their asses whooped. Okay, they get absolutely destroyed. It is also my understanding is that when the planes started coming, there was some concern about Russian air defenses in the region, and it was told to the Russians in no uncertain terms, if one of those air defenses fires on any of our planes, we're going to flatten. Every cruise missile we got in the region is going to be in the air, and we're just going to wipe out. We're just going to completely obliterate and wipe out this whole area. So the air power shows up combined with Delta Force on the ground. They're on the radio. They're making calls. They are just smoking these dudes. These Russians and Syrians are getting lit up like a Christmas tree. I mean, they're in a meat grinder. They're getting torn to pieces. These bombs are falling. There's video online of a T-72 tank taking an airstrike that the U.S. government declassified during this long engagement, just getting torn to pieces. A T-72 tank, that's no joke. That's a significant weapon. That is a significant piece of equipment on the battlefield, and the air power just wiped it out. So you got guys in Delta smoking dudes. You've got artillery and HIMARS coming in. You've got planes coming in. And at one point, the Delta guys, according to a reporting, I believe by Yahoo, don't quote me on that, they were locked down in some armored vehicles, but they knew they couldn't take a direct tank shot. What fortunately helped them is the Russians and the Syrians didn't have night vision in their T-72s and T-55s. They're just firing blindly into the dark. That's getting them absolutely nowhere, not even a little bit helpful. So that is essentially how they got them on the ground. That's how they beat them. You had 40 U.S. guys, most of them Delta Force operators, and then you had fighter jets, bombers, drones, artillery. So they lay waste to these guys. It is absolute mayhem. It is a complete bloodbath. And this is where things get really interesting. The death toll. The death toll, quite frankly, has never been known. It is believed by Syria claims that a few dozen people got killed. Russia claims that, I believe here, we might have it right here. Russia claims 68 people got killed, I believe. The U.S. claims more than 100, and then unofficial Russian claims have said it's as high as 300. And the thing is, nobody knows because Russia's not going to tell the truth. Syria's not going to tell the truth. They're both going to keep the numbers really low. The U.S. kind of also doesn't want to pump the numbers up too much because we don't want to instigate a thing where it looks like we just massacred all these Russians. But there's a few points I want to make. Number one, I've been told, and I believe it's been publicly reported, that the Russians got on the phone while they were getting hammered and the leadership and begged the United States to stop. Now, if these were just contractors and not regular Russian troops, why would the Russian high command be on the phone with the United States begging them to stop? If they're just Wagner mercenaries, let them get torn to pieces. It doesn't make any difference to the Russians. I mean, we've seen how they've used Wagner in Ukraine. Doesn't matter if they all get killed. It's completely irrelevant to them. That's point number one. I'm skeptical of the Russian claim that it was just contractors and some Syrian people. Point number two, the United States didn't even have a guy injured. So they threw 500 guys at 40 guys that were a Delta Force, JSOC component with some Rangers. I believe there was also one Marine there. Don't quote me on that. There was at least one Army Ranger there. I know that for a fact. And the most of them were Delta Force guys. So it was 500 on 40, and as many as 300 enemy combatants were killed in the span of about 4 hours due to the assets on the ground combined with the great air power that pummeled them into oblivion, which leads me to my next point. If you come at an entrenched American position, and we've got the best shooters in the world on the ground, and then we've got fighter jets, F-22s, bombers, F-15s, drones. We've got artillery again on the ground. It's over. No one is surviving that. Nobody is surviving that. And I know there's a lot of propagandists who'd be like, Russia, 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 Russia. Russia's troops, if you listen to the guys I've interviewed in Delta who have seen the Russians, they're not impressed by the Russians whatsoever. Not even a little bit. Now, do the Russians have that top level, those alpha group or alpha force, whatever it's called, their tier 1 unit? They do, and quite frankly, those guys, I would say, are probably the equivalent of an average SEAL team. That's just me being honest. They don't hold anything compared to a Delta Force squadron, SEAL Team 6, the British SAS, not even a little bit. So that's what happened. You play stupid games, you find out. You win stupid prizes. It's the famous graph. F around, find out. That's what the Russians did in Syria. And that's exactly what happened to them. They got torn to pieces. They got put into a blender and diced up and chopped up, and that was that. Will we ever find out how many Russians were ever taken out? No, but I will tell you this. It did send a powerful message to the Russians in Syria. If you mess with the United States, you're not going home. Someone else is going to raise your kids. You get into a gunfight with the United States Delta Force operators in Syria, and your kids are going to be orphaned. It's going to be a tragic end to your life story, because the United States doesn't lose gunfights like that. We got the best gunfighters on the planet. We've got the best CCTs on the planet. We've got the best fighter jet pilots on the planet, and we got the best bombers on the planet. So quite frankly, I don't know what the Russians were thinking on February 7th, 2018. I don't know what the Syrians were thinking, how they thought that situation was going to go any different. It was 500 on 40. And as many as 300 Russians and Syrians got killed in a direct head-on-head engagement with the United States of America. It is believed to be the only engagement of that style that has ever happened in the history of the two countries, and the United States kicked their ass, for lack of a better term. It is just that simple. I would encourage you all to read up on the Battle of Khasham, or however you pronounce it, or the Battle of the Conoco oil fields. It is fascinating. This is what happens. You come at the United States, you're going to get your lights punched out. It's going to be a curtain call for you, unfortunately. The Russians found that out. And frankly, we might never know how many regular Russian troops were in it. Again, according to the guys who were there, they're not convinced it was just contractors, and that's according to actual American boots on the grounds who did the fighting, who got in on the fighting against Wagner and the Syrians. So that is it. That is the famous 2018 battle where U.S. forces directly engaged Russians, smoked them out, and it's crazy. This is the last thing I'll say. When I interviewed one of the guys there, he said the most surprising thing was, over there to them, that was a huge deal. It's like, oh man, we just killed all these Russians. When he got back to the United States, he said he was shocked that no one even had known this was happening. I interviewed another Delta Force guy there. He said the exact same thing. No one in the United States had any idea that this had occurred. And over there, it was massive news because they'd gone toe-to-toe with Delta Force, and the air assets had gone toe-to-toe with the Russians and the Syrians and absolutely, kicked them in the teeth. So if you've made it this far in the video, it means you've been enjoying what we've been talking about and what you've been listening to. So go ahead, like and subscribe, and comment what you think about the 2018 engagement between Delta Force and the Russians. I'll see you next time.